Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall, where we are sponsored by BioStill. And today we have a very special guest. He is a legend in the North Side. He is a legend all over Canada. And he is one of the great human beings you'll ever meet in your life. He works for Roger Sportsnet, and he is the ringside host for your Edmonton Oilers. We'd like to welcome Gene Principe to the 2 Months Podcast. Gene, how's it going?
It's going good. Doggone it. That's quite a 2 months podcast introduction
Yeah.
for me. That's very nice of you. And yeah, you know what? Born and raised Edmontonian, so still hanging out in the city and enjoying it after some trials and tribulations, like so many people through their careers. But it's going great, and happy to start 2023.
Yes, no, you're our first guest for the new year, so we appreciate that, and it's pretty exciting to kind of connect with you here. We got to connect at the Winter Classic on Boxing Day, so it was really nice to kind of see you there. And I kind of said to you and said in our post, Gene, before we get into everything here, is one thing I love about you, and I heard this a lot, but I got to witness it firsthand, was every single person that came up to you, you took the time to have a conversation with them. Didn't matter how long it was. I think that's really special. You think obviously everyone's kind of like that, but just you coming in and everyone just, loving to have a conversation with you, but the passion that the city has for the Oilers too. But I can't thank you enough for just witnessing that, and it says a lot about your character as well.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I mean, I love people. Oftentimes people ask me, what's the best part of your job? What's the worst part? And
Yeah,
I think when my kids were younger, I would say travel because you got to travel to so many great places and watch hockey or watch other sports. But the worst part is you're missing a lot at home. Now that the kids are a little older, don't miss me as much, if at
yeah,
all. I would say for sure the clear cut answer would be meeting people. And yes, that does include the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and Sidney Crosby and the players that, we cover. But it's meeting people like you and meeting people, at the Winter Classic, the Boxing Day Classic. And,
yeah,
I mean, that's what it's all about is making moments and making memories. And you do that through connecting
yeah.
with people at the rink, at the local grocery stores, at an outdoor rink. So I was happy and really privileged to be a part of it. A very small part, but
Yeah.
to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was very special for sure, and it's cool because Frank loves to. He loves the whole mom and pop feel of that tournament, and obviously it's you know when you get it in the hands of some other people and whatnot, when you're doing a good cause too, good things happen, and it's always down a trickle effect, as we were just saying before we jumped on. There's another hockey league here in the city. We're going to do a 4-day tournament, and if what had started there starts a trend in a beautiful way, then at the end of the day, like the real winner, like you said in the telecast, was the Ben Stelter Foundation is the real winner here, and we miss him and we love him, and I got to kind of connect with his father here, and just a great family, as you know, and our hearts are always with them every single day. So it's again great to have you a part of it, and that's going to be a tradition. The money for that tournament every year is going to go to that foundation. So, but as we jump into things, Gene, kind of where do things start with you? Or do you at times still kind of pinch yourself to see, where things started from when you first started to where things are now, and how excited are you to be in the role that you are, and obviously, putting smile on people's faces at home when they're watching the game as well too.
Well, that's nice of you to say for sure. I mean, I think that, when I was a kid growing up, being Italian, soccer was sort of, my first love. I played soccer, I played hockey. I played other sports, whether it be at school or for a club or just with, friends, touch football, for example. But it was soccer that was kind of my first love. And I dreamed of wearing the Italian national jersey and maybe playing back then when I was a kid, the North American Soccer League was the big soccer league in North America. And, God bless him, Pele, who just recently passed. I remember on Sunday afternoons going to Commonwealth Stadium and the Edmonton Drillers would take on the New York Cosmos. And so that was kind of my first passion. And I remember I was about 15 and I tried out for the under 16 Alberta team and I got cut. And I kind of went, maybe this soccer thing might not work out. And I always and to this day, I love sports. And I used to just watch sports all the time. And it was kind of twofold. I watched it because I wanted to watch the athletes, the teams. But I really found myself fascinated by the announcers. And for me, it was such a thrill to listen to certain announcers and then find out who they were and watch the game sort of as a fan, but as someone who maybe envisioned one day of being a broadcaster. So when I got cut from that team, I thought maybe this is a good time to go to Plan B.
Yeah.
And Plan B was being a broadcaster, and so local kid. We graduated from the same high school, and
Yeah.
I went to NATE, the Northern Institute of Technology, and took a 2-year course in radio and television arts. And here we are, pretty close to 36 years later, and still plugging away. And I love the job that I have. I mean, lots of young kids dream of playing in the NHL. That I never really had that dream. I knew I couldn't quite skate well
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah.
but I did have the dream of working in the NHL. And so for me, it's been great to do it in my hometown, to see so many people. You mentioned off the top about the love for the Oilers. Just when I think I can't be amazed by the love in oil country for the hockey team,
So,
I'm always astounded by something new, something fresh, a new group, a new story. So it makes being a small part of the broadcast and being able to sometimes entertain people a real joy in my life.
yeah, no, it's cool because what I love about you a lot is like the positive atmosphere that you bring, not only to the broadcast, but you can kind of see it when you guys were in the locker room and kind of had to take that back a bit with COVID, and now you guys are back in the locker room. Is that positive approach? I wish there was more of that in the game, because we've definitely had some players on our podcast where they talked about the difference between a Gene Principe and someone in a different world or in a different role or whatnot, of just that
Right.
positive atmosphere of yes, there's sometimes you do got to ask the tough questions, but it's coming from a different light. And that's kind of what our podcast is kind of about. Is there's so many different podcasts out here, but we just try, like, my mentor for me was Bob Stauffer, so as you know him
Yeah,
very well. So Staff
very
is
well.
a very good person, and he's my mentor. And and when I wanted to get into doing this, I was learning and getting advice from him. Is there someone along the way that is a mentor for you that really helped you out and guiding you in the direction that you're in today?
Along the way, I've had so many great bosses, and I think one of my first bosses, certainly people in Edmonton, those of us a little bit older would recognize the last name Hogel.
Yeah.
So Bruce Hogel was a long time news director at CFRN TV. And he gave me sort of my official first job. I was a videographer back in 1987 in Grand Prairie. His son Steve was the assignment desk editor who would basically work with the reporters, assign them stories, discuss angles, approaches. And I remember, here I was just turned 20 and I was living in Grand Prairie and felt really isolated. I didn't even know if I could work a camera, but I had to do that and be a reporter as well. And I always felt a bit of a disconnect because to that point, I'd always gone to school or to work. And always been part of a group, and now you were kind of on your own, so it was really different. And especially at that age, it was a bit of a challenge, but I always felt like Steve made me feel like I was as important as the guy or gal sitting across from him,
Yeah.
discussing a story on City Hall, for example. And then along the way, I've had, I feel like someone who does a speech and doesn't want to forget anybody, but Larry Isaac was kind of my first producer back in 1998. Was we're pushing 25 years of hosting Oilers hockey, and I wasn't young per se. I was 31, but still, there's a lot to learn
Yeah.
at that age. As we continue to learn, and I've worked with countless hundreds of unbelievable people. I know that it's a bit cliche to say that when we do our broadcasts, and currently working with Louis and Jack, and some nights Arna Ryan Singh, we always try and be the best team.
Yeah.
Uh, I know you've got the two teams on the ice, or the two teams on the football field, or the two teams at the baseball diamond or stadium. So I've had so much help along the way that I think sometimes when young kids watch me now, they might think, oh, look at him, he's doing this or he's doing that. But boy, there was a lot of molding that needed to occur for me to get to where I am today, and it never really stops. I'm always still, maybe you learn less lessons because I'm 55 now. Hopefully, I'm learning a few less than I
Yeah.
needed to learn at 30, but it doesn't mean you ever stop learning. And so, yeah, it's really been honestly a dream come true and a privilege for me and a pleasure to be able to service Oiler fans and NHL fans, throughout North America and for that matter, as you know, throughout the world.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's very beautiful and very well said. And one thing I love is, like since we even started this podcast, like Sportsnet and TSN have been very helpful in getting people on. And I don't think, I think you guys do a good job with this, meaning you, Jack and Louis, but and to the point of the people behind the scenes that we don't see,
Yeah.
that we don't know. When I was in the World Juniors here in August, I was kind of hanging around the TSN guys and got to very lucky and very grateful to go for breakfast with some of the team. And as I seen that, I'm thinking like, what is that team like for you too, Gene? Like how many great people and all the great people
Oh,
that are behind the scenes, if you can talk and share maybe a story or about the team that we don't ever see
yeah.
because they're doing their job behind the camera, but talk about them if you could.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear you say that. I would say our crew is approximately 30, give or take a couple. And for anyone that's watched me work, particularly in my openings, I like using props and different sort of storylines. Well, I can't tell you how much help I get
Yeah,
with that. And I should give a shout out to my wife and kids because oftentimes my wife is sort of the prop master at home, setting me up. I'll say, "Hey, Karen, do you have what about this or that?" She goes, "Yeah, I think so. Let me find that." Nice thing of having three kids and still having many of their toys and different parts of their childhood in the house is oftentimes I can repurpose for my own use. But there'll be opportunities where I come to the rink and I say, here's what I want to do, A and B, and either they make A and B much better and bigger, or they're able to add C and D to it. And that's the producer, that's the director, that's the graphics people, that's the camera people, that's the audio people. I mean, honestly, they're Connor McDavid,
yeah,
Leon Draisaitl. We always talk about them, right? Okay,
yeah,
but it's a team
yes,
that wins, and that's how we feel when we're doing the broadcast. Yes, you see Jack and you see Louis and myself, but there's so many people that make it work and make it seamless. And sometimes there's things that happen, but off air that you're like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, if people could see what that was like. But then
yeah,
when it gets to air, it looks like, wow, no problem. So
yeah,
it's been a real blessing to have people buy in for me to what I want to do because whenever you've got somebody engaged in anything in life, then they put their heart, their soul, their passion, their commitment into it. If they're kind of like don't believe in it or don't like it, you're not going to get the same force behind it. So it's been a great crew of people, but particularly with props, like just people helping me out with the weirdest, strangest things. They're kind of like, what? You need, pardon me.
yeah.
Um,
I think you got
and then I
drenched
go,
a little too much in Seattle.
I did, yeah, yeah.
I
That
love how
that
you
kid
kind of
kind of
talk you into it.
yeah, he took his job a little too
Yeah,
seriously.
exactly.
But that's a perfect example of someone who kind of went, "What?
Yeah,
What do you want me to do?" And then by the time we were doing, he was like, "I'm all in. I
yes,
like this," and it was great.
yeah,
It was kind of uncovering something in someone that they don't even know they have, or they don't even know they'll need to use. So
yes.
I'm really thankful for the group that's helped not only me in openings and intermissions, but Jack and Louie as well.
Yeah, no, I think you guys do a bang up job, and it's always fun to listen to different broadcasts because every each one has their own different ways of how it comes across. But it's and I think with Sportsnet, you guys have done such a great job, and it's very diverse, and there's a lot of inclusion, and
Yeah.
there's just such a great vibe with that, and the people that we've had on our airways here, it's really cool. So we'll transition to the Edmonton Oilers here, Gene, and kind of the current events now. But where are you at? Where's your level concern at with this team as we sit here in the new year and they're still kind of chugging along and trying to find that consistency in some which way.
Yeah, I guess it's they beat Calgary just after Christmas, the
Yeah.
Christmas break or the holiday break, and that's game Stuart Skinner made 47 saves. And you're like, great, we got it. Seattle was one of those nights where you don't often see one team dominate the other, and then they come back on New Year's Eve and probably could have or should have won against Winnipeg and don't. So there's still a little bit of sort of muddling, as I think consistency is sort of the key term that I've heard Jay Woodcroft and his players often say. And I think they're starting to find that more and more, particularly defensively with both Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell. We'll have to wait and see what the determination is on Leon Draisaitl. Hopefully, it's just days and not anything
Yeah.
more than that. I'm not worried about, to be honest with you, I have no concern about making the playoffs.
Yeah.
That to me is not an issue. Getting first is because when they play in LA here in about 3 or 4 games time, that'll be the midway point of the season. So you that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
I think first is still possible, uh, but if it's kind of the win two, lose one, get an overtime loss, it might be more challenging to get into first place. But I don't think there's going to be like any kind of rush in April, like, oh my gosh, we got to go 5-1-1 to make the playoffs. They'll be there. I'm more interested in seeing how they play in that final week or two before the postseason.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm going too much off last season, but I certainly see this team as being, in my mind, a conference finalist. I don't want to say at minimum, because then it sounds like if they don't make it, it's a disappointment. But hey, they got, you can argue,
Two of the best
two of
players
the
in the
top
game, right?
five players. Yeah, so it depends on where you live and what you see and what you think.
Yeah.
But with those two guys leading the charge, I really like their chances. And
No.
we've seen teams that you wouldn't think would have a real shot at it get there. Colorado struggled to get through round two and then got through round 2, 3, and 4. So they'll be right there and challenging for the cup come April, May, and hopefully June.
Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on Darnell Nurse. I think he's a tremendous leader. I think at times maybe he doesn't get enough credit as he probably should. And you're around him on a daily basis and have been around him since he's been with the organization. Can you talk about what Darnell Nurse is, the player, the person, and kind of what he brings to that group every single night?
Person wise, I love Darnell.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's really, one of the questions I get a lot, and I'm sure sometimes you get it too, is like, who's not nice, or who's kind of a jerk, or who, or vice versa, who's really nice, and
Yeah.
who do you get along with the best? And, honestly, like I look at the current Oilers, and, if I walk around the room and go stall to stall, I mean, there's nobody that's someone you would dislike. Far from it.
I get
Everybody's
it's
different personalities.
Yeah, it's interesting because Gene, I get that question a lot. The people I have
Yeah.
too, and I'm like, like they are actually genuine, really good people. Like this, they get to play
Yeah.
hockey for a living, but when the camera's away or they're not on the ice, they're as humble as you're gonna ever find with them, and it's coming on podcasts and it's giving back and things that we don't see, in the charitable work that they do too. But sorry, I cut you off.
No, but I echo what you're saying, and Darnell's a first class kid, wonderful family. Used to watch his dad when he played in the Canadian Football League. And
Yeah,
so it's kind of neat because the Oilers just came off a father's trip recently. And, when I first started covering the Oilers, I was 31. So I'd be a little bit older than some of the players, but there were some players that age or a little bit older. And then you get to the point where you're like, as old as the parents, and in some cases older than the parents. Most of them are kind of in their 50s and 60s, depending on when that particular kid was born, if they're the youngest or the oldest, or somewhere in the middle. But Darnell, you're talking about charitable acts. Darnell's wonderful that way. Ambassador Free Play for Kids. He has set up scholarship at his old school where he went to back in Hamilton. He's always got lots of time for the community, and I love that about somebody. They're not open the door in October, September, and then close the door, 24 hours after the last game of the season. As for the player, I mean, Darnell for sure is a number one defenseman. Um, he had a breakthrough year a couple seasons ago offensively, and I think he provides a lot of nastiness that's there. That if you're an opposing player, you're not quite sure what you might get if you
yeah,
if you poke and prod too much. And I just Darnell's very hard on himself. I think that all of these NHLers and then if you push up to elite NHLers, that's just kind of the way they have been. And I know it's a cliche, and one you hear all the time is, well, I'm my own worst critic. And I think sometimes people don't necessarily, I don't know if they don't believe it, but they wonder, is that true?
Yeah,
It is true. You take Connor McDavid, you take Leon Draisaitl, you take Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or Darnell Nurse, pick a player, any team, any league. There's nothing that anyone can write or say to them that they aren't already sort of thinking. Now, then it crosses over into what's fair criticism and what's not, and that's a tricky line these days with social media. It used to be you would say it on radio or hear it on TV or write it in a newspaper, but now, as you know, there's so many different avenues. But for me, I got lots of time for Darnell, and he always is a friendly. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Hey, I like those shoes, or that belt doesn't match that jacket. Whatever it is.
yeah,
To me, he's a real. To me, he's a real leader. He'd be in the top two, three guys on that team when it comes to leadership and being able to kind of vocalize and verbalize what he feels the team needs to do.
yeah. No, very well said. I had one encounter away from the rink with him, and a very stand-up person, and it was kind of right after a good friend of ours, Alexander Petrovich, moved on to a
Yeah,
different organization. We were talking about him the other day, and
yeah.
so Darnell knew that I kind of knew him, and so just a genuine, just wanted to ask how he was doing and family wise, and it was really nice. And um, so, kind of another player I like to talk about. I'm not going to give up where he lives, but my uncle lives in the same area as this player, and that's Evander Kane. And him and his family have done a great job walking themselves into the community. But we also saw a special story about with him just recently, and you kind of had him on the panel to kind of talk about it and the giving back part and how important that is. He's missed dearly on the ice, but in ways God's blessing him with, helping some people off the ice in that time. And that probably fills up his cup of tea. But talk about the person again for, Vander Kane and what he's brought to this organization, even since he came here last year.
Well, it's another great example of somebody giving back, and I think you make a great point. If he's playing every second day and practicing and traveling, uh, it's not that he wouldn't be thinking about giving back and helping, but he just might not physically have the time to sort of give to people himself, not about, well, here's something, here's a bunch of clothes, go wear them. He
Yeah,
can actually help get people, dressed and fed. And I covered Evander throughout his career, mostly when he was in San Jose because the Oilers would play the Sharks a little bit more than when he was,
yeah,
in Atlanta or Buffalo or Winnipeg. Um, my dealings with him have always been really good.
yeah,
He's always been friendly, accommodating, easy to talk to. Did some stuff with him via Zoom through the pandemic. And then he became an Oiler. And I thought he acquitted himself quite nice. He was sort of prepared for the onslaught of not unfair questions, but serious questions that have necessarily nothing to do about his goals, assists, and points. And I thought he did well from the moment he kind of arrived in Edmonton. And it was wonderful as an Edmontonian. It was wonderful to hear him say, "Hey, I felt welcome my first few steps off the plane. And I felt really a part of the community." And I think we're starting to see that more and more.
yeah,
And I think he's won people over. Listen, you and I, we have access to people. We get to see or hear. How many people will meet Evander Kane? I don't know how many, but if Edmonton's got 1 million people, they certainly won't all be meeting him. So they have to go off what they hear, what they see, what they're told, and we have the opportunity to go off our own personal interactions. And he's been great.
yeah,
Like, and to further that, I have not seen anything from a teammate kind of going, "Oh my gosh," like
yeah,
nothing. I've seen him be a leader, which I was one thing that stood out of his opening press conference. He said, "I'm going to be a leader with this team," and I think people might have thought, "Hey, you got basically a 5-month contract here. Who knows if you're even going to stick around?" And it was a huge signing for Edmonton in the offseason to have Evander come back. And he is a leader, and I think that Evander's been through enough that when he does stand up and talk, people listen. The injury was unfortunate, but could have been worse.
Yeah.
So I know everyone's looking forward to a happy new year for him getting back on the Oilers. I would say there are maybe I don't know 3, 4 Evander Kane type players in the NHL.
Yes.
That's it. There
Yeah.
just aren't many of them.
Oh,
So, but the person has been fantastic, and I've had people come to me and say, you know what, Gene? When he got here, I was kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I read some stuff. I saw some stuff. I heard some stuff. And now they're going, wow, he
yeah.
sure seems like a nice guy and a real community spirited, good person. I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you. So there is change happening when it comes to Evander's reputation and just what people think of him.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And we were on our podcast. Yes, we were critical, and again, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. You're kind of getting some information that is not probably the best information at times, and then it was pretty quick when he got here that what you did here was probably obviously not true, and there is a genuine good person there. And I feel bad because again, like, when this happens to athletes and people in the public eye, it's not fair. But and then unfortunately you gotta have to go on a platform to kind of defend yourself. And
Hmm.
we had Tyler Toffoli on our podcast just after he got traded from Montreal to Calgary. And one of the things that stuck out to me is, and I could see it in him doing the Zoom interview, Gene, was he did feel hurt by what was read and said about him after, because obviously when he left Montreal played a bit better. But,
Hmm.
not try to, say anything bad about the previous coach, but Martin St. Louis come in and done a really good job there. So
Right.
it happens. You play a different system. But the stuff that had to read about himself, like that's tough for any human to read,
Oh, it
like
is.
it's,
It is. Yeah, and especially nowadays, with the social media stuff, it's just listen. I'm not the only one. You see somebody's trending, and you're like, why are they trending?
yes.
God forbid they've passed. Have they done something unbelievably bad? Have
Yeah.
they done something unbelievably good? Like you're just not sure
Yeah.
what to expect. So it is a different world. But I remember somebody saying to me about Evander Kane, and I'm not the one necessarily giving him a chance. I cover the team, and they said, "Well,
Yeah.
how many chances does he get?" Well, how many chances is too many? Like, what
Yeah.
when do you stop giving society and people a chance? Like, well, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it 10? It depends on the person that
Yeah.
you're talking about, and it depends on the person that you are. I'm open to lots of chances because I've been given chances to do things and not necessarily succeeded in the first, second, or third. So I got lots of time for people, and I really got a lot of time for good people. And Evander
Yeah.
in
Good.
Edmonton, what can you say?
Yeah.
What's he done wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Very well said. We've got some superstars here, as you talked about, and and like you said, wherever market you're in or wherever you watch, you could say, Connor and Leon are here or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think they're the one and two. And full disclosure, I do cheer for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Gene. So don't hang up on me on the Zoom call. But
Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm having
yeah,
trouble.
exactly. But so I get a lot of flack. But we're in Edmonton. I'm born and raised here. So but I just had a big brother from when I was the Big Brothers Big Sisters program who was a Leaf fan. So that's how I became a Leaf fan at a young age. So but Connor and Leon, what they do on and off the ice, and it's even as shocking to even know that, like, because I know probably how much it's eating Leon to not play, because what we saw
Oh,
him go through in the
yeah.
playoffs last year. And we hope he's back here in a very, very foreseeable future here, and it's not a long-term injury. But kind of what they bring, in that aspect of the leadership qualities that maybe, and I don't know if there's a story you can share that hasn't been shared before about kind of how great they are to deal with when it comes to the kind of the media side as well.
Yeah, I think, that, you get these kids at 18, and I've got a son who's a little bit younger than Connor and a little bit even more younger than Leon. And, I'm not sure he can make his own lunch,
Yeah.
let alone, lead a franchise to a Stanley Cup. The one thing I'll say about Connor is, and, I can't say too much about his community minded stuff, but Connor does, the Ben Stelter
Yeah.
love affair was beautiful.
Yes.
It is something that was so genuine with Leon and Connor, but especially Connor. You could just see his face light up anytime Ben
Was around.
was around. Yeah, and so that's been a more public one. But I know Connor does things behind the scenes,
Yeah. Yes.
and I'll find out about them, and I will say, hey, either to the PR people with the Oilers or to Connor, say, hey, I heard you did this, and he's like, do you mind maybe not saying anything about that?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I've
yeah,
heard.
no problem, no
Yeah.
problem. He does a lot that people don't
See.
see,
Yeah.
and it's just again his commitment to the community and the kind of person he's grown into. And he's not there yet, having his own kids, but one day, God bless him, he and Lauren,
Yeah.
will be parents, and I just think he's grown up. Like, we've seen him evolve as a player, but one of the difficult things is to see someone evolve as a person, because you may not get a lot of access to him. But he's a wonderful guy, like a wonderful family, and that tells me a lot. Like when I get to meet brothers or sisters, Connor doesn't have a sister.
Yeah.
When I get to meet parents, you go, oh, okay, now I get where this is
Coming.
coming from. And Leon, I remember when we were in Germany, funny, his dad, Peter, who was in the Olympics and was one of the great all-time German hockey players, he was kind of old school. That was 2018, and they were playing Leon's dad's team, which had to be like the strangest thing,
Yes.
imaginable to go up against your son. And I saw Peter, his father, who was a coach of Cologne at the time, and he's walking outside the dressing room. He's smoking away. I go, Peter, what's going on? He goes, I'm nervous. We're taking on my son. He goes, I always have a smoke, but I've been smoking a little bit more because of it. And I thought, it was such a nice return home for Leon at that point, as he was sort of evolving into this superstar player. And one thing about Leon is I married a German, so I got to watch how I say this, but
Yeah.
they've got this sort of stern, serious look about them. But uh, Leon is really all about the team, and I think sometimes people are kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they like their points. I'm sure they do, but what they like more are their 2 points
Yeah.
for the team. And Connor's like that as well. One of the neat things I like with Leon is talking soccer. Uh, he's from Cologne, or Köln,
Yeah.
as they would say it in Germany. So we talk about the Bundesliga, and we talked about the World Cup, and you could just kind of see these guys talk about hockey all the time. So it's kind of neat to talk about other things with them. I know coming off the Oiler skills competition, it was neat to talk to Connor about his dog Lenny.
Yeah.
When I'm in the room, there are some hockey things that we need to ask
Yes.
about these two great players, but it sure is nice to talk about other stuff, I'm sure, for them, and even for us. But two real leaders in the community and on the ice, and I think it's wonderful to have greatness
Yeah.
when it comes to your skills, but boy, to be a great person, I mean, one day they're going to be retired,
Yeah.
but they're still going to be great people,
Yeah.
even if they're no longer doing anything great on the ice. So it's a real treat to know that our city is in good hands with people like this, living here, playing here, and committing to
Yeah.
Edmonton.
Yeah, it's good. They give back and they're a part of our community, and they make our community better. And it's one thing I love, and this is why I wanted to have you on. And it's a bucket list thing, and I'm super excited to do this interview with you, because I think from watching you, I try to add what I see from you into what we try to do here on this podcast and be about. And that's shining the light on the players and sharing the good stories, and being
I
open.
love it.
It's my favorite part. I had a former player who's not with the organization now. He's different organization, but he still in the NHL. And with him and I had like a long conversation about this, and it was just like beautiful. And he shared what you had posted on his Instagram account the other day. So that was Matt Benning. So
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
So
I saw that. Yeah,
yeah,
Matt was such a great guy. Funny, I went to high school with his dad,
Brian, right?
Brian. Yeah, yeah. Brian was a real hotshot junior hockey player, and I remember we were going to St. Joe's, and that's a long time ago now. It'll be well, not quite 40 years, but
Yeah,
like 38 and a half. So details can be a little sketchy. But
yeah,
Brian, I think he broke his wrist, and so he came back, and he was in school, uh, and I still see Brian, and like you would not know he played in the NHL, or that his
Yeah.
son played in the NHL, or that another one of his sons, Michael, could play in the NHL, or that his daughter Abby's an elite hockey player as well and played with the Pandas. Like just a real kind of, and his dad Elmer, God bless him, was a wonderful guy and a wonderful scout. Who's one of his claims to fame is saying, "Hey, we should draft this Carey Price guy."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so it's interesting. And Matt was just salt of the earth young
Yes.
guy. I always like people will say, when I see a player go, this may sound a bit weird because I cover hockey, but I kind of look at the person that's leaving.
Yes.
I know what they do on the ice, and where Matt was on the pecking order as part of the Oiler blue line, but I thought, wow, that's a good person leaving the team. So it was great to see him catch on with Nashville and then sign a longer term deal with San Jose. And I did see he posted
Yeah.
about the Boxing Day Classic and everything that happened. I thought, good for you, Matt. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and it just says a lot about him, as you know, and you got to know him. And it's just like him and I had this conversation about just the giving back and the shining the light and stuff like that. And like people always ask me, they're like, if you ever interview Connor, if you ever was like to talk to him, like what kind of things would you talk about? I'm like, I don't know if it would be hockey. I think it would be like
Yeah,
life stuff. Like
yeah,
like what's that relationship like with him and his brother Cameron? Like how is that? And how much support does he lean on Cameron? And that's obviously his older brother, and
yeah,
it's family. And I remember when Petrovich was playing here, and I was very fortunate enough to be a part of like going into that family and friends room that they have downstairs, and McDavid's dad with Brian, I think
yeah.
it's Brian, right? Yeah. So
You're
he
right.
was,
Yeah, you got
yeah,
it.
yeah. So he was there, and I was wearing Petrovich's jersey, and they thought I was his brother, but just a friend, but just like very humble people, and it was just us and
Yeah,
grabbing some food, and just like it just really, and I was right when this podcast was kind of just starting, and I didn't know what I was doing when I first started, Gene. I was doing this thing off a cell phone for crying out loud. So people go back and listen to the first episodes. But I finally got some gear and a little bit of setup here. But it's all about for me shining the light on the players because I think at times like we there's a lot of pressure that probably goes into what they're doing, and they are compensated. I understand that, but they're
yeah,
human at the end of the day, and
mm,
one thing that's again, I cannot iterate it more. I think you do it the best in the game, and sharing that, and that's genuine. I honestly, I'm not just saying because I'm interviewing you. Like
yeah,
I say it to Stoff all the time, and him and I, like he'll just be one day he'll just drive, he'll be driving, he'll call me, and we'll just be shooting the breeze, and it's just like it's all about that, and it's cool. Like we had Cam on too, and it's a great broadcast. It's what you guys do every day, and it's fun, and letting us you guys come into our home and genuinely care about what's going on, and bringing smiles to people's faces, and the mental health side of it, and that was really
mm,
prevalent during the pandemic, right? And how much
sure.
that hurt a lot of people, and I think when people listen to these podcasts, it's their escape when whatever's
Oh
going on in
yeah.
life, right? So
And that's how I approach doing TV, to be
yeah,
honest with you. You
yeah,
make a great point. Like, it was after the '06 Cup run to Game 7, and then the Oilers, heartbreaking loss to Carolina. The next season they had traded Chris Pronger, and the team was, having a really rough year. And listen, I hope I don't show it on TV, but I'm born and raised in Edmonton, and I used to walk down Jasper Avenue when they were winning the Stanley Cups and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't White Avenue back then that we went to.
yeah,
But that's not something I want to show on TV. And but I found myself going, wow, this is a real tough season. So I thought, I'm generally speaking, I'm kind of the first person they see when the broadcast starts. I thought we got to hit them with positivity.
yes,
Oiler fans, they know what the power play is doing, what the penalty kill is doing, what the goals against average is. I don't need to tell them. So I
yeah,
thought, let's find some spots of positivity, and let's blow that up. And
yeah,
so that was the premise. And then I thought, well, let's try and entertain while doing that. And then let's start adding some props to that. And so here we are, 16, 17 years later, still doing that. But I always, yeah, to me, listen, in life, in media, everyone's kind of got their role, and there are people who have roles that they have to opinionate and criticize, and write things that maybe we think are fair or not fair.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's not my role.
Yeah.
So I always think I love telling stories about people and, the behind the scenes things that you can't read on a website, you can't see on a stat sheet. And so I take the exact same approach as you do. And you were talking about the McDavids, and
Yeah.
we saw Brian recently on the father's trip, and he's a real, he's a I don't want to say he's a serious guy because that makes it sound like
Yeah.
he's not fun or he's not enjoying himself. Far from it. But it's interesting to see the dynamic of Cam and Connor,
Yeah.
the older brother, as you mentioned, who's succeeding on his own out east in the financial world. And then there's Kelly. Kelly is she's kind of the real bubbly, energetic, lively. I remember once in LA, it was after the game and the McDavids were there, and I think the Oilers had lost. I'm pretty sure they had lost. I think it might have been overtime or shootout, but they got a point. And
Yeah.
Connor came out. His mom was, she wasn't happy about the defeat, but she was happy to see her son, right? Like she
Yeah.
was smiling. They live out east. They don't get to see him, as much as I do, for example, on a day-to-day basis. He went over to his dad and a hug, and then it looked like they were talking some hockey. So I thought, what a wonderful balance here of mother and father
Yeah.
and brother uh, for Connor's support system. I just thought, man, this is a good setup and gives you an idea of who he can go to
Yeah.
whenever he wants at his convenience. That's sort of outside the team circle. And so for me, it's been really fun to get to know the parents along the way, and I know someone might say, well, of course they're proud of their kids. They're making X amount of dollars. They're playing in the NHL. No, they're
Yeah.
just proud of their kids. They're
Yes.
just proud of their kids. And
Yeah.
you can just see that. And as someone who's a parent with kids, I get it. And so it's just wonderful experience to kind of get a chance to just see things that people don't get a chance to see because they're in the stands or sitting at home watching on TV. But you know what? It's a great job. I really, what do they say? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, and
Correct.
that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. We went a bit long. There's one question I want to ask, and that's we
Sure.
always do this at the end. What charity is near and dear to your heart, Gene? And if people wanted to support and jump in on the campaign that you have with that charity, who is it and where can they go?
Well, the Sports Central is a charity that I've been involved in. It's located just right beside the old rink, just off of Wayne Gretzky Drive. And Mark Spector, who I work with at Sportsnet, he was a part of the board with Sports Central. And then Mark, he's put together one of the most, I guess, successful off-season golf tournaments here in Edmonton that usually goes kind of late July, the Mark Spector Golf Classic.
Yeah,
And so he got so busy with that, he said, "Hey, do you want to jump in and be involved on the board?" And I'm like, "Well, sure. It's kids and it's sports." And I remember as a kid, we didn't have a lot, but I was able to play hockey. But I tell you what, I mean, I couldn't shoot that hard, thankfully. But my sticks, I was so careful that I didn't want to break them because I didn't know how many we could afford past one, maybe two, maybe. And I remember getting a pair of soccer cleats from Italy, and I treated those things. I would shine them after every game and clean them, and so I understood the importance of having equipment to be able to play a sport. And so when I had the opportunity to get connected with Sports Central, I just thought this is such a natural fit for me to see kids go in there. There's so many volunteers and some employees that are actually part of the Sports Central family that do an incredible amount of work. And real quick, Alfonso Davies used to, when he was a kid, he'd go get his bike there. He had to get to practice,
yeah,
and so he's kind of, and listen, we're not trying to create Alfonso Davies. It was one of those things that happened. We're just
yeah,
trying to get kids into sports. And so Sports Central is certainly near and dear to my heart. When I see kids playing sports, when I drive by a hockey rink or a soccer field or a baseball diamond, it just, honestly, it shaves years off my life thinking back to when I was a kid and we would just take off and go play like
yeah,
that. We didn't have phones. Well, maybe we had cable at the most. We didn't have all these TV channels. We didn't have that stuff. And
yeah,
we just went and played. And it just makes me feel warm and fuzzy
yeah.
when I see kids playing sports. So Sports Central would be it.
Nice, perfect. All right, Gene. Well, thanks for that, and thank you again for joining us here on the 2 Months podcast. Is It was an honor to have you, and we'll continue to keep an eye on you through the tube. And hopefully in the second half here, the Oilers go on a pretty great run, which I think might happen and should happen. So typically that's kind of things how sometimes they work. Maybe that one win or that one play kind of does it, and getting some guys
Right.
back healthy will be a huge boost. But thanks again for joining us, and we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, happy New Year to you and all your listeners and viewers. All the best to everyone in 2023.
Perfect. Thanks, Gene.